Six from Kitchen Sink Microscopy.
Casey, what do you want to talk about today?
Sounds like you have the end of things on your mind.
Uh,
Is something maybe subconsciously
it,
causing that?
very well could be, yeah.
Yeah.
Like data with three, the number three.
Yeah. Yeah. Recently, our former roommate passed away, and she was also your girlfriend,
For a short while, yeah.
and just generally like a huge part of your life,
Hmm.
and yeah, we've having way too many people die
God, I
lately.
know.
But it kind of, we thought we would come up with something that honored her memory and in an aspect of how we all interacted, the three of
Hmm.
us, and one of the topics that we would often discuss was religion. So, um,
Oh yeah. Well, because
and
early days she was pretty religious.
yes, very Christian.
Hmm.
Um, when I met her, she was still in high school and, like super Christian. I think she had like the purity ring and everything, if I remember
Hmm.
correctly. And I think when she was roommates with us, I think she and I were probably like 20, 21.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I think she was starting to move away from that, but still, like, I remember one time I went with her to Life Center or whatever that is.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The
Yeah.
church. I went to that church for a little while.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
I
actually
went and
kind of
sat
a
in with
cool.
like it was like a Bible study or something that I
Okay, yeah.
sat in on, and I'm sitting there in like my leather and everything, and just looking like a general punk as I often
Mhm.
did, and I had no filter. Well, I guess I still don't. Uh, I was just like, you know. Considering how people were just generally of shorter stature back in the day, I'm pretty sure my dick is bigger than Jesus's. And just everyone in there was like,
It's a fair question.
yeah, I mean,
It's not really heretical to
yeah.
ponder something like that. Yeah.
How was Jesus hung and how hung was Jesus?
Well, but see, there's a double meaning there.
There's a 9-inch answer
Hmm.
on one hand, but it's a mystery on the other.
The world may never know. They didn't elaborate that in that about that in the Bible, so
Well, in the first 5 minutes, I've gone to hell, so.
let's see if we can get me there too.
But yeah,
Uh,
like we all kind of moved away from it, and for various personal reasons. But I think a lot of that centered around ethics, and it might be interesting to just talk about like, is religion really the most ethical foundation for a just society, or
no, I
is
would
something
just
else?
say I would say it's not. It definitely can be good for stability within society, bringing people together, especially a lot of different people who might be argumentative, but if they all share the same faith, then they can look past whatever differences they have and pray to the same God. Well, then the problem arises when you encounter people who pray to a different God, and
Yeah,
hilarity ensues, right?
right.
So
The
I wouldn't
different
say it's
gods and the devils and all this
yeah.
stuff, like good versus evil, and
Well, and I'm sure you run into this in conversations with people or maybe videos you've seen where religious people will say, well, you can't have ethics and morality without religion. That if you're an atheist, you don't have any of those things. Um,
yeah.
which
I,
I
that
don't understand that one.
I never could wrap my head around that one because I think one of our lost episodes, I can't remember what happened to it. Um, we discussed whether or not animals have religion
Mhm,
because, and it kind of, I think the idea stemmed from that very argument,
mhm.
wherein you can often um, rebut with the fact that we've observed ethics in the animal kingdom.
Hmm.
So are you assuming that before ethics arose naturally amongst apes or whatever, um,
Even
there must
even
be an ape religion, a gorilla Jesus or whatever?
and even dolphins as well too.
Yeah,
Um, or there's a variety of animals, and yeah, those kinds of traits are exhibited in that the animal kingdom. Essentially, of course, we're part of that, so we can't ignore
mm,
that fact. Uh,
right.
you know, um, I mean, we are remarkable, certainly in a different class, but not really that far separated, I suppose. Uh,
Right.
yeah, and oh man, I had a thought, and I can't recall exactly what it. Uh, well, oh, I can't.
Ethics without religion, something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Well, because I was thinking like, because both her and I are, or well, she was, I am non-monogamous,
Mhm.
ethically non-monogamous, and and that is, I mean, generally seen by, in particular, the Christian faith as being really bad. Like marriage is sacred, and your sexuality is sacred, and you can't do anything in that regard until you're married. I don't know how.
Save for the Mormons.
Well, yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah. But they're like a little, they're a sidestep from traditional Christianity.
Mhm.
Um, and so, yeah, I don't remember the thought that I had, but I figured we could like throw that in there too.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So, well, that is a good point. Like people that are religious see things like that don't fit the cookie cutter of their particular religion and
Mhm.
assume that it cannot possibly be ethical.
Yeah.
Like there cannot be any ethics to non-monogamy because it's not what I was taught. Like
Mhm.
it's not what's in this ancient book.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, fuck. This that should be proof to yourself that ethics exists outside of religion.
Mhm.
The chicken and egg is kind of irrelevant. Like even if ethics began with religion, it's become greater than religion.
Yeah.
It's better than religion.
It's expanded since then, if it didn't already exist prior to the
Right.
foundation of various religions. Oh, I
Yeah.
know what it was. We were kind of pointing to this idea that well, because it started with talking about ethics in religion, and how people, a lot of the Christian people will point to atheists and say, well, like the idea of you can't have ethics without religion, and it's like, well, yeah, you can. In fact, it's much more significant when you don't believe in anything yet you still behave ethically. That,
Right.
like, oh, you know you're not beholden to a god or a doctrine to tell you what to do, and I'm not. And it's the same thing with monogamy. I don't necessarily follow the practices of the common person, of monogamy, and yet my relationships are just as fulfilling, and in fact maybe in a way more fulfilling, because it's like, well, I don't have the law and the church to bind me to another person. I just have me and the way that I interact with them, and that's it. Like they're free to leave anytime, you know
Mm.
um and so maybe that, I guess in a way it makes you kind of have to think more and work a little harder. um and the same thing applies with religion. Like if in the absence of religion, you can't fall back on, say, like a Bible or a Quran or whatever to be the definition of how you conduct yourself. You basically have to craft it yourself or as a community. uh,
Right.
and I think that's a much better, well, it's at least more logical.
Yeah. And, you know, eh, you can't think of ethics as existing in this vacuum. Like a 2,000-year-old book can't possibly teach you how to handle cyber interactions with people. Like you might be able to draw parallels to other situations,
Hmm.
but th- eventually, if you dig deep enough into it, there will be something unique about it that you can't really you can't say that, oh, well, the Bible predicted the Napster and downloading music
I was
and stuff.
just
It's like,
about to bring that up, the concept of theft. And it's like, well,
yeah.
yeah, but nobody's losing if you copy and paste a file. Like
Hmm.
it is infinitely copyable, in fact,
If
without
you
any harm.
arguably wouldn't have bought it anyway,
Hmm.
stealing it isn't hurting anybody, especially since the person who uploaded it already bought it.
Yeah.
Uh, so there are ethical gray zones
Hmm.
in what seems very cut and dry to certain people.
Hmm. Certainly to like the legal system.
Right.
Like, they don't have any wiggle room in that regard,
Well,
any
and
nuance.
it's the same with thou shalt not kill.
Hmm.
Well, it's like, okay, the people that tout that so heavily often are also in favor of the death penalty
Yeah.
or going to wars. Like, why is it okay to kill if the government says so? Why
I
is it
agree, and
okay?
my interpretation for quite a while, ever since like, well, probably middle school or high school, has been that particular commandment meant thou shalt not murder.
Right.
So without cause, extinguish another life. That's the distinction that I draw. So, hey, someone's about to kill you or your friend or your loved ones or a stranger or whatever, and you step in and kill that person to stop them from doing that. Okay, that's morally and is justifiable. Like, okay,
Hmm.
that like logically justifiable. And but like war, that's a whole different thing. And I don't want to be too judgmental in that regard, because like I don't think that soldiers who go into combat and kill people are specifically murderers. Um, in a way, because like, what did that person actually do to you?
Right.
But when you
Yeah.
have an organized military structure that going and fighting another organized military structure, well, they've all kind of signed on to this.
That,
So,
yeah. I
is it
mean, the war, like the battlefield, is a little different because once you're there and you're facing off, you each have that mad doctrine in mind.
mm,
Like, if I don't shoot, they might shoot me.
it's kill or be killed, essentially.
Yeah.
So
So
what are you going to
so
do to
just
preserve your life?
the very act of being there makes everybody a potential murderer,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Now, maybe the way to handle that is to say, okay, well, soldiers in combat are not murderers because they're going with the whatever the organization is doing, whatever they're conducting. But we need to evaluate very carefully those giving orders to those soldiers. That like,
mm,
can this be justified? Can this action even be justified to bring these people in, to not only, because the thing is, it's bigger than just a guy with a rifle shooting at another guy with a rifle. Like, because it isn't that, say, a general says, hey, we're going to send these forces here to attack the enemy over there. Like, okay, yeah, you can look in that direction at your own forces and what they're doing to the enemy, right? That and then you have that. But then it's also like, well, now the general's putting them in the line of fire, their own people. So yeah,
mm.
is the general the murderer at that point? you know
Right. And even even the Bible itself would justify killing people in certain situations and
Yeah.
um like and actually very non-ethical situations like
Hmm.
just being gay, you should throw stones at them until they die. Like
Or
what?
killing your son as a test to see how
Right.
faithful you are.
Like what kind of fucked up shit? Like
Mhm.
even 2000 years ago, I find it hard to believe that the common person would look at that, read that, and say, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. That's ethical."
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
like,
and then
oh,
actually, you bring up a very good point that what if religion clouds people's judgment and blinds them to the
definitely.
ethical issues, and so they're willing to do something because they think their God gives it the green light, you know?
Yeah. Same with, I mean, we say this often. Same with politics.
Yeah,
It's basically just religion.
it is. Yeah.
And yeah, like people let their politics blind their ethics as well.
Hmm.
You
Actually, you know what? Actually, now I think we should like define the difference between, say, ethics and morality, because a lot of people, there's a lot of, well, there's some crossover, and it can get confusing. So what do you,
yeah.
what would I, what would be your um, explanation of that?
Um, it- the too long didn't read version, if I
Mhm.
had to condense it, I would
That's
say
fine.
ethics is more like what's fair, and morality is the difference between right and wrong.
Yeah.
Uh, like you can have something be like morally correct, let's say, like not wrong,
Mhm.
um, but also be like technically unethical.
Yeah,
Like
I agree.
it's
Yeah.
it's not hurting anybody who's already lost the $20 bill if you just pick it up and put it in your pocket.
Mhm.
They lost it no matter what. Why not add it to your pocket?
Mhm.
But I mean, you don't know. Maybe they were just around the corner about to come back and look for it. So
Mhm.
that's one of those situations where it's like it's not wrong, but it's also not fair. Like
Exactly. Well, I would say I agree with what you're saying there, and I guess my addition to that would be that morality deals in emotion and feelings, and ethics deals in logic and reason.
yep,
But basically, they're kind of covering a similar realm, I suppose. Um,
yeah, yeah, and I mean that would be the. Of course, you have to like factor all of those together,
mhm.
and
I think
and
I think the two should be together. Like you need to consider both.
yeah,
Like it's like you can't be purely logical or purely emotional. You have to be
right,
somewhere in between, and understand that it's like it's a yin and yang kind of thing. Like they're part of the same uh, system, I suppose. I can't think of a better word. Uh,
right, or like you're starving and you're in a grocery store and you stick an apple in your jacket.
mhm.
That's unethical.
Yeah.
It's also illegal,
Mhm.
but it's the right thing to do because you have to eat or you
Yeah.
have to feed your child or, like,
And on the flip side, the store owner, right, from their perspective, it's like, well, yeah, legally you did a bad thing that I could go after you for. I could call the cops, I could uh, kick your ass or something like that, and it wouldn't be unethical, because it's fair that, like, hey, this is my stuff and you just took my stuff that was my livelihood. But also from a moral standpoint, the emotional side of things, it's like, well, you know what? It's just an apple. They clearly needed it. It's all right, and maybe just give a little, because, well, hey, you're
yeah,
fellow human beings. We all need to work together, because, yeah, the universe is a harsh place, and
yeah.
you know.
And I can't think of a single religion that goes into that much detail about how to conduct yourself in a moral and ethical way,
Mhm.
or even tying those two things together. Or actually, I don't even think religion talks about ethics, period.
Not really.
Um, not to my knowledge anyway. And and maybe that is because it's from a standpoint of logic, and bringing logic into the mix of religion is
It
a dangerous ingredient.
it's like, you're flicking the bottom card on the stack of the house of cards, like,
Right.
how, or that,
Oh, you're
you're
applying
playing
logic to
Jenga.
the Bible, huh?
Yeah. It's like you're playing
Uh,
Jenga, and there's that one piece at the bottom. You're just trying to,
yeah,
and the whole thing's like, whoa, you know. That's what bringing logic into religion does. Um,
exactly.
yeah, it's, man.
Well, I mean, this is how, like, those things, like being in the Bible, like stoning gay people to death and stuff.
Hmm.
That's how you get these extreme echo chamber types, like the Westboro Baptist Church,
Yeah,
that, they have their website, godhatesfags.com or
yeah.
whatever. And it's like,
Mhm.
what? Wow. Like,
I,
you call yourselves Christians, and it's all about how, like, what your God hates.
even
Like,
though if you read a lot of the New Testament and Jesus's teachings, it's all about accepting people, even if
yeah,
they're not necessarily people that are the best people in the world, the most upstanding or faithful people. Um, and yeah, and that drives me crazy. And here's the thing: it's like, okay, I wonder if they've even read the Bible, those Westboro Baptist people, because it's like, okay, the Bible's a big ass book, right? It's big.
mm,
There's a lot of text in there talking about a lot of different things. And the stuff having to do with homosexuality, I think it's like a couple of verses here and there. And it's
right.
in the Old Testament, if I remember correctly. It's been a
Yeah.
while since I've read the
Oh,
Bible
yes.
front to back.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, really, if it was that big of a deal, if it was such a big deal, first it would be in the Ten Commandments. That'd be the 11th commandment. Second, it wouldn't be just kind of just like a footnote in something. It would be like, oh, they devote like an entire chapter to this thing because it's such a big deal. So it's like,
Right.
there's where the logic comes in. You can look at this and be like, well, okay, maybe God isn't totally keen on homosexuality, but is like, well, eh, I guess I'll let it slide. I'm not happy
And
about this, but I'll let it slide. But honestly, it's like, well, then how come you created human beings with the capacity to be homosexual? Huh?
right.
Did God
Well,
make a mistake?
that's the problem with letting religion define your morality and ethics, is
Yeah.
that if it's not explicitly covered, you're just kind of assuming that it's not moral or
Mhm.
not ethical, and that's problematic. Uh,
Very. Well, I kind of see it like if you were to try to live your life according to, say, the Bible or whatever religious text or doctrine that you ascribe to, um, it I would kind of draw a parallel between like the Bible and, say, like a government book on like building codes or something. That like the building codes are a guideline. Now, granted, it's the building codes actually make a hell of a lot more sense because they're based on engineering, which is based on who knows how long of failure and mistakes and mishaps, and like, well, okay, we learned something, we're going to add this in, we're going to try to improve it and make it better. But nevertheless, it's like, okay, living by the book is never a good thing. I mean, okay, yeah, if you want to be boring, um, but you're never going to have interesting houses if you just completely follow code 100%. Like, also, it should be challenged from time to time because maybe they're wrong about something.
well, of course, like the code is updated so often, I mean, that tells you, like, it's always wrong. Like,
by
it's
the
in a
time
constant state of being wrong.
by the
Like,
time you bought the most recent book that was issued, it's already like out of date.
yeah.
Like, uh,
And that makes me think, like, just society, the way society has been built and structured, and uh, the whole concept of law and how people conflate that with morality and ethics when it often doesn't jive with
No.
either.
Yeah. In fact, I
Or
think I did a microscopy about that.
yeah, and God, I wish that hmm, I mean morality is subjective,
Hmm.
let's say.
Oh, of
Um,
course. Yeah.
and
Ethics
ethics
is,
is to some degree as well.
yeah,
Um,
ethics is less subjective.
yeah, but like it would make sense for a law to be, like a combination of the two. Like
Yeah.
if this is not ethical and not moral, then it's pretty generally wrong.
Hmm.
Like, you know,
Yep.
like that's a good example of something being definitely wrong. Is like
Mhm.
it's morally bad and it's unethical. Like,
Actually, I was just thinking, like, what if what if there was kind of we decided to build like a book of human operation, like a code kind of thing, and that is discussed and evolves over time, and people can throw in stuff to like challenge it, and it needs to be challenged. That's the thing. It's like science and engineering. It has to be challenged for it to be valid. If it Because here's the thing, if it can withstand a reasonable challenge, then it's probably true or close to true. But if it can't, then, well, we should discard that and forget about it because, well, it's been proven to be not valid, essentially.
yeah, and I wouldn't even dare to use words like true, just more like generally agreed
Well,
upon.
yeah, I
Yeah.
no, we've discussed the truth before, and my take on it is that truth is a vector, not a destination. It's not a point
Mm.
that you can arrive at. It's an infinite vector, and so you can get really close to the truth. You could certainly uh, calculate the closeness value to something like that, but you can never be 100% certain about that, because, well, you would have to be God at that point. You'd have to be omniscient, which, like, okay, none of us are, even though a lot of people think they are.
Yeah, and I don't know why can't religion just be strictly about spirituality
Yeah.
and not trying to blend that with the corporeal world
Mm-hmm.
because like they don't they don't really cross over so well.
No.
Um just because like I mean spirituality in essence is by definition subjective.
Yeah.
And if your morality is defined by religion, okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's your subjective morality. If your morality is defined by something else,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it may be, that's just as valid.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
whatever is defining like your idea of right and wrong, your idea of fair and unfair, that's perfectly valid. You don't have to, I don't know, put yourself on this pedestal and say like my way is the best way and
Mm-hmm.
everybody else should adhere to what I
Yeah.
consider the best way to be, like
Well, and I would say one factor in that is justification, like logical justification of things. Well, and what we were saying about spirituality, to me, at least, as a person of logic and science and stuff like that, is the study of the unknown. There's a lot of shit we don't know, and
Mhm.
there's these feelings and forces and bizarre things that we encounter out there that defy explanation, at least currently. And so there's worth there's value in exploring those things, and maybe going inward into your own psyche, your own subconscious, and seeing what's out there, basically.
Yeah.
And that is the spirituality side of things to me, and it also ties in with this kind of force connection that all souls have, all life has. That it's like, there's a, I don't know, there's a bond there that um, is important to bring out, to I guess, hold to yourself, that like we all, well, it's like you could just look at Earth by itself, and it's like, yeah, look at where we are. it's
Mm.
it's a podunk planet in the middle, like, well, it's not in the, I guess it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's insignificant, and this is all we got. Like, why would we fight over these petty little things when ultimately, like, we need to survive, right? Isn't that what humans try to do? All life generally tries to preserve itself in one form or another, and we shouldn't get in the way of that.
How how great would it be if we just threw away all these mountains of paper with legal code and legalese and pages and pages upon forgotten things that are just kind of carved in stone and forgotten about, that somebody can dig up later and use to hurt another person with,
Mm-hmm.
like, throw all that away and just look at every situation on a case by case basis and say, was this moral?
Mm-hmm.
Was this ethical?
Yeah.
If you can't get a yes on both, then uh or if you can't get a no on both,
Mm-hmm.
then it's right. Like
Yeah, or at least
okay,
it's closer to right than it
Yeah.
is to wrong. Well,
And if it's like, oh yes, it was definitely immoral, it was definitely unfair, then you can like take some punitive action. But if there's any like in between, any gray, any question, like, well, that was technically unethical, but
mhm.
it was the right thing to do. Like, that should be handled differently,
Yeah.
always.
Oh, okay. Well,
Um,
that's what the.
with with no precedence, no legal precedence. That's bullshit. Like,
Mhm.
what other people did in the past has nothing to do whatsoever
Well,
with the situation
the,
being unique as it is.
the circumstances could be totally different.
Right.
Um, well, and that's what the tribal elders used to do, is analyze things on a case by case basis. And they knew the community and that kind of thing, and they were trusted. Obviously, if
Mhm.
they weren't, they wouldn't. Well, nobody would defer to their decisions.
Yeah.
No, you're right. It, what am I thinking here? There were a bunch of thoughts that came in all of a sudden, as usual. Yeah, damn it. Oh
Well,
well.
this is how you get these like predatory business practices and stuff like that. Like, like the insurance companies suddenly canceling their fire policies for LA and stuff like that. It's like, well, it's ethically wrong, and it's morally wrong, but it's legally okay.
Oh, that's what I
So
was going to bring up. Yeah, that one of the problems with legislation, as I tend to refer to it, or the law, as many others do, is that it's arbitrarily created. Like,
Mhm.
it's just, say, a politician that won a popularity contest, or some judge that did that too, or was appointed, or something like that, that decided, oh yeah, this is the way it's going to be. Whereas, like, okay, I'd much rather see something akin to the way scientific papers are written, like peer reviewed studies and things, where you can't just simply say, this is it, and then that's the law of the land, right? No, no, no. You have to justify it. It also has to pass um, other experts in the field analyzing things, challenging it, trying to replicate it, trying to prove its validity or disprove it. And then if it can pass that, then okay, well maybe this deserves consideration. Not that that means, well, we're going to carve that in stone and this is forever going to be one of
Right.
the commandments.
I feel like that's the problem. Like that's really no different than people pointing to the Bible and saying, oh, that's wrong because it's in that book there says
Mhm.
so. Like that's bullshit. That's pure and utter bullshit. Like,
And this is the problem with a lot of these religious texts is that they aren't clear. The, the text isn't even, well, and even when you're talking legislation, it is not comprehensible except by like the most high level scholars that have studied that. And it's like, okay, well, so you expect the common man to completely fully understand this and be like, oh yeah, well, that's a problem in and of itself, but also like the fact that it's just kind of made up. Like, okay, but why do this? Show me the rationale. Give me your best explanation as to why we should be doing this. Now, in an emergency, you can't do that. Like if someone's like, oh my god, we got to put this fire out right now, or that bomb's about to blow, like, okay, well, you don't have time to sit there and debate about it. Like, okay, well, we got to do something, whatever. But when it's talking about the human condition kinds of things that have existed for millennia, I think we have a little time for discussion. Um,
right.
you know,
I mean, what I'm talking about is just we shouldn't be writing anything down at all. Like, what's the point? When you realize how useless and stupid precedence is,
mm-hmm.
there's no point in keeping records of all this shit. Like, just each situation, handle it accordingly. Like what happened. Of course, you still have to look at facts and
Yeah,
try to determine whether or not somebody's lying about something. Of course, it's not so easy,
yeah.
but none of that relies on there being these giant books full of, you know, sneaky, crafty ways of winning your arguments.
Well, and
This
there's
is
even
really
like,
all it is. Like,
there,
it's just a stupid chess game. It's all about which lawyer plays the game better. It has
well,
nothing, almost nothing to do whatsoever with what's actually happened.
well, and when you have like law dictionaries that attempt to define the meaning of one word, um,
Oh,
that it's like if you need that, there's problems. Like
yeah.
if you can't, that's why I've always said the 10-year-old test, right?
Mhm.
Like whatever piece of legislation you put into place should be comprehensible by a 10-year-old, by a panel of 10-year-olds, however many. And if like none of them can understand what's being said, well, okay, go back to the drawing board or give up. It's not worth the candle.
Like,
Eh,
if you're a religious person and you think like, okay, like the general structure of law comes from religion.
mm,
Well, who was like stepped down from God, who was in charge of distributing uh, the justice, right? Like keeping the order and all that stuff. Or was it just kind of like frontier law? Was it vigilante justice?
mm-hmm.
Because
And I don't want
that's the
to,
way it should be, honestly. Like,
yeah.
if you can't clearly define, hey, this person was immoral and unethical,
Mm.
then the state shouldn't really necessarily do anything about it, but they also shouldn't prevent you from doing something about it.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that being that's logical.
Yeah, I mean that creates a far more uh, effective deterrent to doing wrong because you if you understand the law now, you know what wrong you can do and get away with because it's technically legal. But if you do something wrong and you can't fall back on a law to protect you from somebody getting pissed off and wanting to fix that themselves,
Mhm.
then you're going to conduct yourselves, in a little more ethical way, I think.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. And the community judgment is pretty powerful.
Yeah,
Um,
but it's effectively impotent with law.
with the way things are now, yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Oh yeah. Well, here's one thing too that just popped into my head. That for people who follow religions of whatever kind or flavor, um, there's as many flavors of religion as flavors of Linux, by the way. In fact, probably more. Um, it, so if you believe that your God and the words of your God are correct and um, sacrosanct, I think is the word I'm thinking of.
Mm,
That well, consider this. This stuff came from potentially thousands of years ago, and originally was passed down by word of mouth in small communities, very local. Like we didn't have air travel or space travel, we didn't have the internet to disperse all this information. And it wasn't until the invention of the printing press, essentially, that we could mass produce these documents and hand them out to people and spread them out. Like, okay, so, well, wait, that's a confounding thought that like, so why wouldn't God just, your God, whoever your God is, just go everywhere, right? Isn't he omnipresent? Just go everywhere on earth, maybe everywhere in the universe, and tell everybody about God, right? Why do you need
mm,
missionaries to spread the word to
right.
places that haven't heard of God yet? Like, well, wait, how come? How come this super being was unable to reach this whole entire continent for thousands and thousands of years? Um, what? So now God's like, well, I guess I just couldn't get to South America, so I'm going to rely on you Europeans to do the dirty work for me. Like, wait, that doesn't even make any sense.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
That's really what it is like there's just people who came up with these stories and then, you know, added in a little twist
Mhm.
to make it too scary not to believe. Like, oh, if I don't believe that, I go to hell or whatever. Um, and that's like a brilliantly effective way of brainwashing people.
Or
Um,
making people compliant or
mhm.
whatever.
Yeah, yeah. 6 of one, half dozen of the
Yeah,
other.
yeah.
Um,
Well, you don't necessarily have to be brainwashed to follow orders out of fear.
yeah,
Like that, the threat of something like that might make people do something, even if they're not doing it out of faith. They're just afraid of the consequences.
mm,
Um, Even though, well, that's the thing. If you're talking like the King James Bible and the Bible of Christianity, there's not hell is not even a part of that, as far as I know. I mean, there's some, like hints at various things, punishments and things like that, but not like hell specifically. That's a more modern invention.
yeah.
Um, but that you're right. Now, I want to say though, I don't. I'm open to the idea that a lot of these writings that have been crafted by human beings, like I'm open to the idea that they were potentially based on something, something spiritual, something alien, who knows, otherworldly, let's say. They could have their origins in that, um, but people, of course, interpret things the way they will, especially when you don't know what the hell you're looking at.
Could have been a dream, could have been a
Yeah,
hallucination.
it could be. Could have
It
been
could have been
aliens
something
coming.
that happened but didn't happen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or it could have been something that happened, but nobody could comprehend what it was. So they kind of made up their own stories around it. And then it, because it was such a big deal at the time, it had a lot of story making traction. So people were embellishing and adding things. And of course, word of mouth, you want to tell a good story around the fire, right? So you
Right.
add a little bit more and a little there. And well, like the mana machine, we've talked about it, that there's a whole entire set of texts surrounding that,
Right.
when like it probably was a piece of equipment um from somewhere, and that spawned its own side religion basically. um
It's not a whole lot else that could be interpreted as,
I
you know.
know. Hmm.
Um,
Oh
especially
yeah.
with like the like the way it describes it as if it were like a human, but it's clearly not a human, you know, like with the
Hmm.
beard and the testicles and the
Well,
brain and
and the interesting thing too, it's like, okay, the people, let's say thousands of years ago, whenever this took place, when this story began, they didn't know what um, wires were, what electricity was. They didn't understand
Mhm.
radioactivity, radio communications, or anything like that. And now, like this, so they did the best they could to describe what they saw, what they witnessed, or what they used. Um, and now we can look at that with our technological advancement and be like, oh yeah, that's only obviously talking about a machine. Like it's clear, even though it's sort of muddied up by a bunch of religious mumbo jumbo that's thrown in there, and like you said,
Yeah.
the human anatomy descriptions.
Mhm.
And I see that even in like the Bible, going back and looking at it, and it's like there's some things in there. It sounded a lot like technology, and not some kind of mystical force or whatever. Um,
Yeah, and when you think of it in that context, like what if all of these like deleted or omitted texts were compiled and translated and disseminated for anyone to read and interpret? Like, I feel like a lot of people would be like, holy shit, all this time, what we've considered God was just based on an alien visitation. You know,
mhm,
like that actually happened. You know, whether they're still here or not
mhm.
is not even remotely proven or disproven by that.
Yeah.
All that proves is that it did happen at one point, you know?
Well, and it can be corroborated. This is the thing. If you just simply limit yourself to one religious text, it's not quite so clear. But if you
Hmm.
read as many as you can, the your cork board with the push pins and the string connecting lines to things, it's like, yep, it all sort of looks like some visitation from another world of some sort, whether it
Yeah.
be interdimensional beings or hollow earth or aliens from another world. It certainly looks a lot like that.
Well, and who knows what the situation was like. l- let's just say one possibility is that there were at some point uh, kind of a roving species of extraterrestrials that happened upon Earth and say, "Oh, there's some sentient life here,"
Mm-hmm.
and their whole mission is to be like, "Hey, look at this cool technology we've come up with. We want to show you what's possible. We want to give you a little taste of it, and we want to give you some guidelines to like evolve your society quicker
Yeah.
so that you can do this stuff too and go out and
Mm-hmm.
experience all these cool things." You know, like what if that's all it was? And
Mm-hmm.
they were like, here's these things, you know, they spend a few years and, you know, communicate with people and then they go on their merry way. And
Or
here's all this fucking religion that
I
comes from
know.
it.
Yep. Well, you can see that with the cargo cults. Look that up if you know. Well, what if it isn't necessarily people just coming here to bestow their wisdom and all their technology on the beings that already exist? What if they were explorers and they got marooned here somehow? And
Yeah.
so they were like, well, I guess we're stuck here. We can't get away. And instead of buggering off and going back to wherever they came, they just blended in.
Right.
And like the technology they had, which was obviously far more advanced than the technology of like the Neanderthals or something, um, it just became like this kind of holy relic, right? Because
Right.
it's like, man, look at what this thing can do. It brings food, or it vaporizes stone with a thought or something. And but yet they don't have the means to repair it because that exists on wherever they came from and not on Earth. So it
Yeah.
eventually went defunct, and then just yeah, some of these things could have been the foundation of multiple religions. Um, and and that's something to consider. And it's like, actually, to me, that's far more interesting than there being a god out there.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Or even what if it's like a quantum leap sort of thing? Like
Mhm.
their method of travel doesn't allow them to ever go back. They can just
Mhm.
go other places,
Yeah.
like,
Or like Stargate too. Like,
yeah,
oh, hey, you go through to that one place, and either there's a Stargate there to return through, or there isn't one, and now you're stranded.
right.
Or you get there, and well, now you have to analyze the stars to figure out the combination to get to where to open the gate again. And then like, well, they're like, oh, we don't even have the technology to analyze the stars enough to put these pieces together. So I guess we're stuck. Um, like that, that's a possibility too.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, the idea of there just being simply a god that created the universe and I don't know, commanded humans to write a book, and then just kind of doesn't just wandered off or something into the depths of the cosmos. That's boring.
Right.
It's super boring. Like,
And
okay, well,
and not believable. Like
yeah,
it's just, I don't know. Uh, It's too simple. Too
yeah,
simple. Like
exactly. Well, like,
and
okay,
egocentric too.
mhm, it is, yeah.
Like that, none of
Mm.
that makes sense. Like,
That
of
that just
course,
the
of course there's
egocentric,
other life out there. Like that.
yeah, the
What?
egocentric nature of a lot of those things just smacks of like, well, that's humans who crafted that.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, if God who created this entire universe, like, of course, God would be like, well, yeah, there's a whole bunch of planets all over the place, and here's all the stuff you should know. But we didn't hear any of that.
Right. And the whole like created in his own image thing, like, like for all the shit that Star Wars and Star Trek gets for having so many humanoids, it's like it is kind of a practical uh design for like dexterity and longevity and moving about and like maybe people in general just evolve this way wherever in the universe they are,
Yeah.
but with of course some differences, but they're gonna generally look well like crafted in the same image, right?
And it
Whatever that
makes
may
sense.
be. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then of course we can go into Star Trek, the Next Generation, that one episode with the uh, those
Hmm.
beings that had like seeded all the main species in the area,
Yeah.
and like eventually it turns out, hey, everybody's kind of connected, and of course some liked it more than others.
Yeah.
Mm,
And if you think about like in his image or whatever, and how
mhm.
loosely that can be interpreted. And then you look at how they describe the mana machine with like a beard and a brain and a
Yeah.
penis and stuff like that. And it's like, well, that if you're describing a machine, it definitely doesn't look like a human, but you're
Mhm.
describing it as if it were a human. So
It, you know what? It could be as simple as like some genetic engineering. where maybe there were some proto-humans already existent on Earth, and these other humanoid beings came to Earth and they're like, hey, well, why don't we fix you up a bit? Let's make you a little bit more efficient.
Yeah.
It'll help you accelerate, you know, give them bigger brains and more complex thought and more dexterity and things like that. Whatever. So that could be the creating man in his image, that sort of thing. I mean, it could even be something as simple as interbreeding. That too. Yeah. I mean, the Garden of Eden could have been the landing site where people, the beings constructed
like Amsterdam or something.
Yeah. Well, what if they were in the desert and they created a an oasis there to live in while they figured out what they were going to do? Who knows? But then, of course, like the thing that's difficult to explain, and I'm sure some theologists have attempted this, but like, okay, well, when like the whole Cain and Abel thing happened and he was kicked out, like, oh yeah, and then he just goes to another fucking city.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute.
Right.
I thought the Garden of Eden was the beginning. How is there a totally established city? Where did that come from? Where is that in Genesis? Where do they tell the tale of the God building this majestic city? You know,
if you build it, they will come